Go ahead, guys.
On? Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome. We are so happy to welcome all of you participating. I think over 300 people on Zoom and, of course, on Facebook and our YouTube channel will be joining us as well for part 3 of the Wilmette Institute's WI Live with Rainn Wilson. We are, of course, continuing to remember and send prayers and positive thoughts to all those who are affected by the pandemic and all those in the world who need a boost of love. We're so happy to have Rainn Wilson with us and our WI registrar, Nikki Daniels. We finally get to see who is behind the polls. But before we call our guest speaker, Rainn Wilson, on, I just wanted to introduce him. As many of you know, Rainn Wilson is best known for playing the role of Dwight Schrute on the sitcom The Office. He has many different film and television credits that include Galaxy Quest, Almost Famous, The Rocker, Super, 6 Feet Under, Juno, many more. And he has a forthcoming series, Utopia, and also The Power. So we look forward to those. Wilson also co-founded Soul Pancake, a digital media company, and the Lide Foundation, an educational initiative in rural Haiti that empowers at-risk women and girls through the arts. So without further ado, we welcome Rainn Wilson. Please join us. I hope you're there. Right. Welcome, Rainn.
I wanted a little reveal there. Who's behind the dog photo? Bow. Boom.
Yes, here he is. Thank you so much. So Rainn, I'm going to turn it over to you to maybe open with the first poll, if that's okay.
Yes. So we're going to have a poll here. We'll see what happens. The poll technology is a little bit odd.
I'm going to allow panelists to vote. There we go.
Ah, here we go. Perfect. So this will help us get to know you a little bit. People who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube won't be able to see, but as we're getting to know you, it's how much do you know about the Baha'i Faith? Next to nothing. I know a little bit. A friend told me about it. I know about it from attending some Baha'i activities. I know quite a bit from reading and researching, or I consider myself a Baha'i. I know a lot, but am always still learning. So, Lloyd, can we have some background music while people are filling out the poll? Should just take a minute.
Sure.
Otherwise, I can sing.
Thanks for the music. 75% have voted.
Great.
80%. Wow, 100 people have voted already. Give them a couple more seconds. We want to get to 90%, folks. And your prize will be Rainn will send some dog hairs from his pooch.
I'll send you one of the guinea pigs in the cage from behind me.
Okay.
So, wonderful. Do we have the results? Nikki?
Okay, let us end polling now. People are still, come on, one more. Let's make it 110. Do I hear 110? All right, we're going to end polling and share the results. So
wow.
60% consider themselves Baha'i. The next one down is 17% who know a little bit. Friends have been telling them about it. And 11%,
a lot of Baha'is on the in the house tonight.
Yeah. 11%
right.
have attended Baha'i activities. 9% know quite a bit from reading and researching. And 9% know next to nothing. Okay?
So all those Baha'is need to get off of the Zoom call right now, go find a friend who knows very little about the Baha'i Faith, bring them back to the Zoom call, because that's the entire point of the whole affair. But all are welcome. All are welcome. Great. Well, Chitra, this is our
Yeah.
third week in a row doing
Mhm.
this. We've had a great feedback to our conversations. People have been
Yes.
enjoying it and
Yes.
are watching it currently on Facebook and on YouTube, and then they get posted, and then people watch them afterwards as well. So really excited to do this. We'll be doing our next one on May 6th, but we'll announce that at the end.
Yes.
So take us away. We've got some questions that came in over the last week, and we like to start our discussion, ladies and gentlemen who are viewing, with some questions that were pre-selected by us that came in either on comments on the YouTube or Facebook page, or were sent or emailed to us or asked in the chat room. And we're going to address some of these questions and give some quotes about the Baha'i Faith. And then we'll take questions from people. But before we do that, and this is wonderful that we've got this quote up, is there anything we want to hit about the Baha'i Faith? Do we want to do for some of the people who know very, very little that are here?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea to just give a very short introduction, if you would, Rainn, please.
Yeah, sure. So for those who are in the 6% and the 17%, those first two questions, I will say that the Baha'i Faith is the second most widespread of the world's religions. There are about 5 or 6 million members around the world, but we're spread all over the place. Next to Christianity, we're the most widespread religion. We're in Vietnam and New Zealand and Mongolia and Borneo and any place you can think of. There are vibrant, vital, hopefully Baha'i communities praying, worshiping together, serving humanity. The Baha'is believe that there is only one God, that all of the religious faiths in the world that worship something called God, Gaia, Jehovah, the great creator, the great spirit, that it's all the same God, that this God educates humanity by sending down divine teachers, spiritual teachers every 500 or 1,000 years or so. And you've heard many of their names, like Krishna and Abraham and Buddha and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad. And now Baha'is believe that there is a most recent one called Baha'u'llah, and that name means the glory of God. So Baha'is are followers of Baha'u'llah, the glory of God. He lived in Persia, Iran in the mid-1800s, not that long ago. But Baha'is are also followers of all of the world's religions. So at Baha'i gatherings, you'll hear readings from the Bible, you'll hear readings from the Quran, you'll hear readings from the Bhagavad Gita or the writings of the Buddha, that these spiritual teachers are there to educate humanity spiritually, just like humanity is progressing materially, we're progressing technologically, humanity needs to progress spiritually as well. So Baha'u'llah's teachings are really, Baha'is believe, not better than the teachings of other religious faiths, just simply more relevant because they're simply more modern and addressing the ills of the time. So Baha'u'llah calls these divine teachers divine physicians. So Baha'u'llah, as the most recent of the divine physicians, has diagnosed problems that have spiritual solutions. And these are the equality of women and men, the elimination of racial prejudice, the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty, the essential harmony of science and religion, the importance of the individual investigation of truth, the importance of universal education, and many, many more teachings. And Baha'is are trying to, through prayer, meditation, service, study of the holy writings, we're trying to make ourselves better human beings by increasing our capacity to reflect the qualities of God that lie within us, our virtues like compassion, kindness, love, humility, and we're trying to make the world a better place and usher forth an ever-advancing civilization, in the words of Baha'u'llah. So Baha'is are working on a twofold moral path, making ourselves better people and trying to be of service to humanity at the same time. There's many more teachings. That's the 4.5-minute nutshell version of the Baha'i Faith. I'm sure I left out plenty. And Chitra and Nikki, do you think there's any bullet points we want to hit in here before we move on?
You know, I think that's an amazing start, an amazing short intro. Yeah.
Okay. There you have it.
So we, of course, took the questions and tried to cluster them again. I guess there's some that there was one in particular, though, we're going to quote from Janice, and it's on the theme of love. So she asks, how does being a Baha'i change your relationship? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Is that the one on love? Or, oh, you're muted, Nikki.
You're muted, Nikki, love.
The answer is about love. The question isn't about love, but
okay, all right.
Okay,
so it is under that theme. Okay. How does being a Baha'i change your relationship with coworkers and your approach to many different hats you wear as a comedian, writer, actor, director, and producer?
Okay, great. Yeah, great question. I think that for me, there's an issue that I had been dealing with my entire life, and maybe some of you can relate. And that was that I found my life very compartmentalized. And I would have my home life over here, and my spiritual life over here, and my work life over here, and my hobbies over here, and my friends over here, and my family over here. And I would kind of act differently depending on which box I was in. So I think for me, as I've attempted to, and I haven't done necessarily a great job, but as I've attempted to become a better Baha'i, which for me means simply going on a spiritual journey in my life, trying to be a better person, trying to serve more and make the world a better place. As I've gone on this journey, sometimes fitfully, I've tried to integrate. And I think about the word integration coming from integrity. You know, if you have integrity, you have integration. It's integral. There is something where if I see myself as a spiritual being, a soul, and I'm riding around in this meat suit body for 80 some years, hopefully, knock on wood, and then my soul goes on to infinite planes and worlds of God on its spiritual journey. We're on this physical plane for a while. Then I want to integrate all of these things into one seamless whole, where I can be a spiritual guy who loves spirituality and praying and meditation and connecting with people and talking about spiritual ideas and talking about Baha'u'llah. And I'm also a comedian and tell oftentimes too raunchy jokes, inappropriate jokes, and try and make people laugh and entertain. And I'm a storyteller, an actor, and writer and director. And there's a connection between being a storyteller and being a spiritual person, because the arts in the Baha'i Faith are very woven into the Baha'i teachings as one of the highest services that you can perform, that the arts are synonymous with worship in the Baha'i Faith. So making The Office, being Dwight on The Office, was believe it or not, this might sound pretentious, a form of worship. And that my
really
family
beautiful.
life, that my family life, my work life, my spiritual life are all one kind of seamless whole. And that's kind of what I try and do, what I try and fail at.
And I think that maybe when you saw this question and we had a little conversation about it, this was a quote that you recalled, right? From Abdul Baha.
Yeah, we were talking about how ultimately the answer to most everything is love. Now, it's love in action, so it's not just the feeling love. There's a lot of ways to talk about love. Like, you can have the emotion of love, but love is also an action. If you really love something or someone, you're taking an action of service towards that person. And this is a quote by the son of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, who talked about love a lot. There's incredible mysteries around the word of love. It's in the Baha'i writings probably more than any other word. Certainly it's in Christianity and all the major world's faiths.
That's right.
But I just thought this quote was so beautiful.
Can I read it?
Do you want to read it?
Yeah.
Please, please.
Know thou of a certainty that love is the secret of God's holy dispensation. Love is heaven's kindly light, the Holy Spirit's eternal breath that vivifieth the human soul. Love is the one means that ensureth true felicity both in this world and the next. Love is the most great law that ruleth this mighty and heavenly cycle. Love revealeth with unfailing and limitless power the mysteries latent in the universe. Love is the establisher of true civilization in this mortal world and the shedder of imperishable glory upon every high-aiming race and nation.
Beautiful. Thank
so
you
much,
so much, Nikki.
Thank you. So much beauty and truth in these quotes. But I was really struck this time, like this, we think of love. How do we think of love in contemporary society? Like, I love you. Like, I love my wife. I love my child. I have romantic love. I feel love in my heart. And this is elevating love to a whole other level. And a mystery, a power, a force, a tool. It's heaven's kindly light. It's the Holy Spirit's eternal breath. The most great law. It's connected with the limitless powers latent in the universe. And the final one, love is the establisher of true civilization in this world and the shedder of imperishable glory upon every high-aiming race and nation. Okay, that's a crazy last sentence. Chitra, you're smart. You're a lot smarter than me.
Okay, well, I'm not.
How do you translate? What do you think Abdul Baha is saying here? And by the way, folks watching, thank you for watching. There's no clergy in the Baha'i Faith.
Oh, yeah, thank you,
Chitra and Nikki and we're not priests or rabbis or mullahs, we're just, I'm an actor, Chitra's an educator, and Nikki works at Wilmette Institute and is a teacher, and we just have our opinion. So as we saw, there's 60% Baha'is on here. So the 80 Baha'is that are watching right now, a lot of them right now have very different opinions, and I'm sure would love to hold forth at great length. But, get your own class, you pesky Baha'is. That's what I have to say.
Leave them alone, Rainn.
What do you think he means by that? Because all of a sudden we start with love, and you're like, oh, love is beautiful and love is this, and all of a sudden it's how is love the establisher of true civilization and having to do with race and nations?
Yeah, it's amazing to think about this quote, and actually it's much longer, right? That love is what binds the atoms together. It's like, so we have physical laws like gravity and physics and all of that. I think in like manner we have spiritual laws, and if we want to build an ever advancing civilization, like you said in the words of Baha'u'llah earlier in the program, we really have to think about how the spiritual laws will manifest themselves materially. So I remember being on this quest. I went to study international agriculture, and I thought that I was going to become someone who would help end hunger. And as I studied, I realized that it's really not the production of food that is the issue. It's not necessarily an economic or agronomic question of like producing enough food when we were dumping, or countries dumped tons of wheat into the ocean. But it's indeed a spiritual question of whether humanity sees itself as one. Just like a human body, all our organs are interrelated and are interdependent one to another. Does humanity see itself as one race, as one family? And that is, in fact, the main purpose of the Baha'i Faith is to unite all humanity. And in order to do that, love is at the heart of it. That is the spiritual force that is necessary for us to see ourselves as one family.
That's beautifully said, Chitra. So if we had enough love as a human family sharing this planet, then we would distribute the food more equitably. Because like we're in this crisis right now with the coronavirus and the pandemic, and we're making sure our families are fed, right?
That's right.
But can we increase that love to the people on our block? And then can we increase that to the people in our neighborhood? And then the people in our town, and the people in our state, and then the people in our nation, and the people on our continent, and the people in our world? Can we love
and
them
then
all?
The species, and then the earth.
Yes.
That we truly have a planetary consciousness where we are taking care of all.
Based on love as a source of social good.
Yes. Thanks, Rainn, so much.
Yeah.
Okay, the second question comes from Maziar. In what ways does the Baha'i Faith address political corruption and economic disparity in the U.S.? That's a biggie. You can do a whole hour talk on that, I know.
Well, we could do a whole semester-long course on this. So you guys found, Nikki and Chitra found some really beautiful, heavy quotes. So we're getting heavy right off the top here, folks. Right? Listen.
Should we, sorry to interrupt your flow of thought, but can we say a little bit about the Universal House of Justice or Baha'i administration so that the audience has an idea like who the author of this document is?
Absolutely, yeah.
Nice.
So the Universal House of Justice is the kind of supreme administrative body of the Baha'is of the world. The Baha'i, it bears going into a little bit, dipping our toes into a little bit into the administrative system. So if there's no clergy in the Baha'i Faith is democratically elected. So every community, I live in Agora Hills, California. There's about 9 Baha'is here or something like that. Every community, every year, right around this time, elects a body of 9 of its wisest members to conduct the affairs of that community. There is also, that's called a local spiritual assembly. There's also a national spiritual assembly of every country in the world, 9 people that are elected every year. And then every 4 years or 5 years is the Universal House of Justice elected by representatives from the nations. And those are 9 people that live in the Baha'i Holy Land, where the administrative center of the Baha'i Faith is in Haifa, Israel. And they are seen as really perfectly translating the writings of Baha'u'llah and his son Abdul Baha and other central figures of the Baha'i Faith to how to enact them in our contemporary society. So they're guides between the holy writings and putting them into practice. When they send out a letter, that's what we look for from this guidance from the Universal House of Justice. So is it divine? No. Is it not really, but is it really a perfectly summated tool based on the holy writings of Baha'u'llah? Yes. So this is, Nikki, you read that other one so beautifully. Do you want to dig into this one?
Yes. Not content with whatever values prevail in the existing order that surrounds them, The friends everywhere should consider the application of the teachings to their lives and using the opportunities their circumstances offer them, make their own individual and collective contributions to economic justice and social progress wherever they reside. And the quote continues. The letter is pretty long. It's a few pages long, but we just chose these two quotes. Every choice a Baha'i makes as employee or employer, producer or consumer, borrower or lender, benefactor or beneficiary leaves a trace. And the moral duty to lead a coherent life demands that one's economic decisions be in accordance with lofty ideals, that the purity of one's aims be matched by the purity of one's actions to fulfill those aims.
Beautiful. Can we go back a couple slides, Nikki, to the question again, just to refresh everyone on to what the question is? In what ways does the Baha'i Faith address political corruption and economic disparity in the United States? Okay, and we can go back to the quotes now. So we wanted to say a couple of things about this. One was that Baha'is are not political and don't get involved in partisan politics in the sense that we believe that partisan politics is a deeply flawed and corrupt system, and it's not really worthy of our attention to try and fix it or prop it up. Partisan politics is based on greed, competition, money, power, status, etc. So when Baha'is are working on social justice issues, we don't pick a political party or have a yard sign or donate to candidates or anything like that. That's not to say that Baha'is aren't politically involved. It depends on how you use the word political. If it means social action and being involved in seeking justice, you will find Baha'is very much involved in that. However, not necessarily through a partisan lens.
Because that only divides, right? Partisan only divides. There's no way you could get anywhere.
Yeah, and partisanship only creates disunity. So how can we do this with maximum unity? And so in speaking about this particular social justice issue, as I mentioned, one of Baha'u'llah's teachings being the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty. How do we do this? Well, this is one, there's many ways that we do this, but we were all struck by these sentences because this is basically saying that the friends everywhere should apply the teachings to their lives, use their opportunities, and make their own individual and collective contributions to economic justice and social progress wherever they reside. So you may be the CEO of a big business. You may be a humble auto mechanic. You might be a school teacher. Who knows what your circumstances are? But no matter who we are or what our circumstances, we can be fighting for social justice around us in every decision we make. We go to the next slide. Oh, am I at the next slide? Oh, yes. Sorry, it happened and my eyes didn't even register it. So every choice a Baha'i makes, an employee, an employer, a producer, a consumer, a borrower, a lender, benefactor, or beneficiary, leaves a trace. And it's a moral duty to live a coherent life. And I was talking about that, a coherent life. I was talking about a life of integrity. But a coherent life is a really great phrase too. It's a coherency where there is an integrity and a unity binding all of the aspects of our lives, that our economic decisions be in accordance with the ideals of the Baha'i Faith, and our purity of our thoughts and beliefs matches the purity of our actions. So there's many ways to address this, but this is tackling one, which is that we all have a part to play. It's kind of like the similar part that we play in terms of climate change, that you can make every decision you make as a consumer, as an employer, has an impact on climate. So we have to start there at the grassroots. Of course, we need to, elect people that believe in science and want to limit pollution and protect the environment. And, there's there's more things we can do, but this is how we start at the individual level.
Rainn, can you, in one of the past webinars, you talked about integration and disintegration. Would you cover that again? Because I think it would really give a big picture to what you're saying. And then if you wish to also, for the political aspect of the question, to maybe talk about the difference between Baha'i elections and what we see in mainstream.
Yeah. Why don't you do the Baha'i election one? Because I'm yapping way too much, and they'd love to hear your mellifluous voice more than mine. But I will.
That's funny.
We spoke recently, and I was having a conversation with a Baha'i friend about the fact that a lot of young people are very confused these days because they see horrible, horrible things happening. And at the same time, incredible signs of hope and unity and progress. And they're both happening at the same time. And it's very hard to hold in our heads. It's kind of like this pandemic, basically, where people are dying. There's certainly going to be a recession, if not a depression. This is going to affect people for generations to come. It's very scary. There's a lot of partisanship and blame being pointed around. There's racism rearing its ugly head, with Chinese people being the targets of violence and being blamed in weird ways. So there's all this horrible stuff. And yet we see people connecting in new and inspiring ways. And we are seeing ourselves as world citizens in new ways as well. And there's a lot of positivity coming out of it. And this goes hand in hand with a Baha'i philosophy, which is that we're in the midst of two forces that are operating at the same time on planet Earth right now. The forces of integration and the forces of disintegration. Integration, bringing people together, uniting hearts, creating the idea that we're all on one world, a species inhabiting a planet. We're all one human family. And disintegration, that old structures, old ways of doing things are falling apart at the same time because they can't hold. Oh, there's my wife in the background feeding the guinea pigs. Hi, Holiday.
Hi, Holiday. Hi. Pull up a chair.
If you want to be on camera, you can be there. If you want to be off, you can be over there. It's really up to you. Thanks
we love to have you, Holiday.
She's far, far more pleasant to look at than I am. So maybe we should have her on the camera. Or you could be back there with a guinea pig and then no one would ever listen to anything that I'm saying. I just wanted to let you know that you were seen here. And so integration and disintegration both happening at the same time. And that can be very confusing for people to go like, well, what do I look at? Where do I put my focus? Oh, this stuff is terrible over here, but this stuff is good, but I don't know. Well, we're told as Baha'is, and I think it's fair to counsel everyone to ally yourselves with the forces of integration. So where you see integration happening, ally yourself with those forces of integration, whether it's building race unity, whether it's promoting the rights of women, whether it's helping in immigration or the poor, the homeless, however you want to work on integration, put your attention and your focus there. The other stuff's going to disintegrate on its own.
Yeah, and so remember in the first session, the example you gave was kind of like the election process, like the mainstream one is just all about not understanding one another, but about debates and winning and losing and getting the other one down, the other side down. There's no vision of integration and unified vision and so forth. And so, as you said, another time, like when Baha'u'llah was in prison for 40 years, he wrote a lot, from very mystical works to practical writings. And one of the practical things that he wrote about, a prerequisite to peace, I would think, is really the Baha'i administrative order. And a part of that, it was already described about the election process, is when Baha'is elect locally, nationally, and internationally, it's without campaigning, without electioneering. It is through a private, secret ballot. Imagine what would that look like if we had a spiritual foundation for our, process, our mainstream process. Everything right now is ruled by money and lobbying and corruption. And that's really like what the teachings of Baha'u'llah brought forth is a spiritual revolution as an answer to the crying needs of humanity that is steeped in, corruption and materialism. So that's the political aspect of the question. I won't say more about that because we have more slides and we have more questions.
Could you imagine elections in the United States happening with prayer and meditation and humility and no campaigning and simply wanting to elect the best, wisest, most spiritually mature people for the job as a public servant? That's where I'd like to get to.
Yeah.
Okay, we got another poll, Nikki. Talk us through this one. We like to keep things interactive.
I'm getting there. Polls.
All right, we got you.
And maybe Boyd can be getting music ready for us.
Okay, community building. How involved have you been in community building efforts and social action? Not at all. Not much, but I'd like to be more involved. I do the minimum. I vote, sign petitions, post on social media, etc. I am a member of one or more civic or philanthropic organizations. And lastly, I help build capacity in others. I dedicate a good deal of my time to philanthropy and community building efforts. So we see 28, 33, 37%.
And this is helpful. We want to keep things interactive, and we want to keep get to know you better, the people that are showing up here to Wilmette Institute. So this helps us get to know you and helps us kind of learn about you and how to answer the questions that are posed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 70% seem to be stuck at 70%. Some people don't want to vote.
Let's get it. We got to get this over 100, right, Nikki?
Yes, come on, you can do it.
Oh boy, these guys are sticklers.
Sometimes it's hard. Someone told me last time that it was hard on their phone. Like they couldn't
get it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we got 102.
Wow, you see?
Yeah.
You ask and you shall receive.
I'm going to end polling now and I'm going to share the results. So let's see, 28%, that's the largest percentage. Help build capacity in others. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And 26% are members of one or more civic or philanthropic organizations. 25% say not much, but I'd like to be more involved. And that's good. That's good that you want to be more involved. And 20% say I do the minimum. And only 3% say they're not at all involved. So
this is good news. There's some involvement on many levels. So we're always on that path.
It's interesting how spread out that was. Basically 20% of everyone spread out among not very involved and very involved. So that's interesting. Shifting gears a little bit.
Yes, it is shifting gears a little bit. We have a question from Jinus. Oh, are we gonna? I think that's kind of blocking the question. Oh, thank you. Okay. The question is, what is special about manifestations of God, and how do we know they are really connected to God? So manifestations of God is a Baha'i terminology for what mainstream may refer to as messengers of God or prophets of God. So I will turn it over to our dear Rainn to share with us some ideas. Just before you do though, Rainn, in our conversation we had looked at an article that was on BahaiTeachings.org, and it had some of the points that we had referred to in our last session. Remember, I was referring to proof of Baha'u'llah's mission, because the question had come up once before about how do you know a messenger of God is really from God or divine in nature. And so if you want to visit that article, please contact us. I mean, see it, for yourself.
Is it, what's the next slide? Is it there, Nikki? I forget what the next slide was.
I think the points are there. Oh, is your quote?
Oh,
There's
great.
a quote and then the points.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. So, yeah, this is a great mystery, and it's the mystery of faith. You know, you can ask a Christian how they know that Christ is the Son of God. You can ask a Muslim, why they believe that Muhammad is a prophet of God, the messenger of God, the friend of God. You can talk to a Buddhist or a Hindu about the divinity of the Buddha and Krishna, Lord Krishna. And basically you read the writings and you ponder in your heart and your soul whether you believe that there is something divine there. There's a divine spark there or not. So this is a great quote from Baha'u'llah about this concept of progressive revelation I talked about a little bit at the beginning in the introduction to the Baha'i Faith. I'll read the quote and then we'll talk a little bit about that. He hath manifested unto men the day stars of his divine guidance, the symbols of his divine unity, and hath ordained the knowledge of these sanctified beings to be identical with the knowledge of his own self. He being God here, in his own self being God. His divine guidance being God's divine guidance. Whoso recognizeth them hath recognized God. Whoso hearkeneth to their call hath hearkened to the voice of God. So this is Baha'u'llah speaking of these divine teachers, these specially anointed, quote unquote, manifestations of God. They are day stars of his divine guidance. They are symbols of his divine unity. Knowing them is knowing God himself. Recognizing these teachers in the day in which they come is recognizing God. When you hearken to their call, you're hearkening to the voice of God. So that is a incredibly poetic and profound way of describing this process of God sending these divine physicians, these divine teachers, these manifestations of God. And I love the word manifestation because it has the word manifest in it. It is God manifested in human form. There's a part of God in these special teachers. And, like I described early on, they were sent throughout history to help humanity grow and mature along spiritual lines. They are equal in their stature. They're equal in their knowledge. One analogy that Baha'is often like to use is they're like, when you go to school, you have a third grade teacher who's teaching you, the alphabet and subtraction. That third grade teacher probably knows as much as your 11th grade teacher who's teaching you algebra, but you're not ready for everything that they have to share with you at that time. So all of these divine teachers are equal in station and have the same amount of knowledge. It's just the relevance of their teachings to the time in which they appear.
Any thoughts,
Absolutely.
Shra, or shall we see what the next slide has in store?
Yeah, let's look at the next slide because it has some of those points.
So there was a wonderful article on BahaiTeachings.org, and it's a great website to check out, BahaiTeachings.org. And the author, do we remember the author's name? I forget.
Yeah, don't have it. I can pull it up.
Yeah, no, we'll find it. We'll find it later.
Yeah.
But he had a really nice little article where he was breaking down, how do we know Baha'u'llah is divine? And of course, in the Bible, it says you shall know them by their fruits. So, you know, a bad tree can't produce good fruit, you know. So what are the fruits of Baha'u'llah's revelation? The beauty and insight and power of his writings, his teachings, which we've been over. We've just shared some of his writings. We've shared some of his teachings. His life, you know, Baha'u'llah was a wealthy nobleman. And even as a teenager, he was known as the father of the poor because he was always giving all of his father's money away and serving and tending to the poor, and turned his back on being a nobleman in Iran, in Persia at the time. He could have gone into the court of the Shah. He abandoned all that in order to follow a spiritual path and to serve poor people. And there's countless examples in his life of his divinity. The effect of his life and teachings on his followers. So we see that, again, a tree bearing beautiful divine fruits, his followers following the spiritual path that he laid out. Many prophecies he made that came true, the prophecies that he fulfilled. So Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the fulfillment of so many prophecies that exist in all of the world's major religions. And then, what's the last one? The global spread of the Baha'i Faith. And then to look at the success of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah's teachings that have spread around. It's still relatively small, but it's relatively young, 150, 160 years old. And 5 or 6 million Baha'is spread all around the world. So those are some of the proofs, if you were, of like, how do we know that Baha'u'llah is who he says he is? I think it's kind of deeper and more mystical than that ultimately, but that's a certain way to think about it.
Yeah, and Rainn, you know, when you're talking about this point, you know, I think that being an immigrant from Iran, I was maybe 5 years old when we came, and reflecting on the endurance of the Iranian Baha'is for so many decades of continual oppression and repression is also, to me, a testament of the teachings that when you are the victim of violence, economic strangulation, have no religious freedom, but to respond with constructive resilience and with nonviolence, and continuing to put their lives at risk, you know, for having moral education for children and social and economic development for the poor. So to me, those for just personally are proofs of the teachings manifesting themselves, you know, decade after decade in the lives of those who are practicing.
Wonderful.
There was a related question. Oh, I said I wouldn't go rogue again. I'm sorry, Rainn.
Take it. This is good.
I know that you answered this before, but if you want to just, you know, go deeper into it, somebody did ask, what was your personal, how did you become like a Baha'i? How did you recognize the Baha'i faith? I don't know if you want to leave that for another time or go into it now. It's just...
Yeah, well, I kind of went into my personal story last time, and I really want to get into this next question here because it's related. Yeah. And someone over in the comments said, maybe it got pulled. Someone had sent in a question about, and so this question is, how to and what extent does the Baha'i Faith address reconcile where contradictions occur in the teachings of manifestations such as Buddha, Jesus, I'm guessing that says Muhammad down there.
Yes, etc.
And oh yeah. So I love this topic related to this concept of progressive revelation, of God's revelation progressively being revealed over time. Someone else had sent in a question. I think it was over here before, and it's gone now, but it's really interesting. Like, how do you reconcile the fact that it might be considered blasphemy what you believe in terms of the unity of the different religions? Let me explain that. So to a lot of Christians, they would say Christ was the Son of God, and he's not a mere prophet among other prophets. He is the Son of God. So God so loved his only Son that he, sent him to earth. And for a Muslim, they would say that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, that there will never be another divine teacher after Muhammad. And I remember once posting something about Krishna, and a Hindu was very angry because they said, no, Krishna is a god taking a human form. He's not a divine teacher among all these other divine teachers. He's a god, and that's blasphemy that you would call Lord Krishna a mere man when he is a god sent down among men. So on a certain level, what Baha'is are saying is blasphemous and very, very different than what many other religions believe. On another level, if you kind of take a step back and look at it from a 20,000 foot view, you see that there's no discrepancy whatsoever. God did send his son as Jesus, metaphorically his son, not literally his offspring, but metaphorically he sent his son and sacrificed his son's life. And Baha'is believe in the purity and spirituality of that. And Muhammad, the message was God's messenger, the revealer of the Quran. Baha'is believe in the sanctity of the Quran and of Muhammad, and in the God-likeness of Lord Krishna. But going now towards the contradictions, Baha'is believe that the essential truth of the teachings of these holy men are the same. And if you look at their universals, you'll see complete harmony. What is that? Service to others, love one another, create community. The material world, the material life is an illusion, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we will continue on in infinite progressions in spiritual realms. The nature of sacrifice, that money and status and material comforts weren't going to lead ultimately to our happiness. All of these universal spiritual truths exist in all of these different religions. Some of the differences have to do with who was speaking when. Jesus had a message to the Jews of Palestine and the Romans and the other tribes of the area in the year 0. Muhammad had a special message for the warring tribes of Saudi Arabia in the year 600. And, the Buddha had a special message for, the Hindus that he came into around Nepal, and 2,000 years before Christ, or 1,000 years before Christ. So that created great differences. Also, in the case of Jesus, what he actually said wasn't written down for couple hundred years after he died, and in Buddha it was several hundred years after he passed away. So we're not sure exactly how correct some of these documents are. But that's where the differences arise. There are social teachings that are kind of geographically specific and specific to a certain time.
Mm-hmm. And even, would you say that some of the spiritual concepts in religions may outwardly differ? So just as you said, some sects of certain religions will say there is no manifestation. This manifestation is God himself. And we know as Baha'is, God is not him or her, an unknowable essence. But what you said reminded me that in addition to the social teachings that are so different, are some of the concepts of like justice, of whether a manifestation of God is God or man or both. And I love this analogy in the writings where God is likened to the sun. It illuminates the whole earth. And the manifestations of God are like perfectly polished mirrors without dust or anything that can reflect perfectly God's love and light and message to humanity, to the world. And so if someone were to look at this mirror, this perfectly polished mirror, they would say, well, that is God, but it's the reflection of God. And so that's why Baha'u'llah says, were a messenger of God to say, I am God, he verily speaketh the truth. And if he were to say, I am but a man, he also speaketh the truth, because they have that twofold nature within them. And those are the things in the writings, the explanations that enable us to see, wow, this is really one. These are the bridges, the conceptual bridges that I think enable us to truly have unity.
And can you talk a little bit about the Kitab-i-Gan? It's mentioned there, the Book of Certitude, and how that helped you to understand this concept of progressive revelation and these different divine teachers?
Yes, actually, this time I pulled out some of the books because Nabil, my husband, had gotten a whole bunch of new stuff, and now I have them. So this one is the Kitab-i-Gan, which is the Book of Certitude. And it basically, my experience with it was when I was 14 years old, and I was really asking a lot of questions of God, why there wasn't unity, why we didn't have justice, why the world's religions were fighting. If God really wanted us to see the oneness of religion, why did he make it so hard? And why did he make it outwardly so different? And so in the Kitab-i-Gan, not only does it talk about progressive revelation, but Baha'u'llah talks about how humanity is tested when we have to see the signs of the next messenger of God that appears. So for those people who were after money and power and manipulated religion, they stuck to the literal interpretation of the prophecies. And for the people who truly had open hearts and could read the words and see the message, the new message that had come, and recognized the new messengers of God, it was as if God was sifting through those who really, were pure-hearted and wanted to be about spiritualizing their community and the world. And so for me, that was very significant to understand why outwardly there are so many religions and why God didn't make signposts. I said, God, if you wanted the Jews to recognize Jesus, for example, and for all the next religions to recognize the previous religions, why didn't you make it easier? But really, it's I think that if we did not have free will, we would just be robots. But all of these books and revelation is for us to investigate and look for the truth ourselves.
And this quote by Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, sums up this same journey that you're talking about, Chitra. It is necessary for a man to put aside all in the nature of superstition and every tradition which would blind his eyes to the existence of truth in all religions. He must not, while loving and clinging to one form of religion, permit himself to detest all others. It is essential that he search for truth in all religions, and if his seeking be in earnest, he will assuredly succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another Baha'i quote that I'm going to butcher, and maybe you guys know it. It's essentially the religion is the light in the lamp. Don't fall in love with the lamp itself. Fall in love with the light that's contained within the lamp.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
my haphazard.
Got the spirit
Or
of it. That's perfect.
summation of a much more beautiful quote. Anyway, Nikki, what do you got for us?
How have you been coping with the current global crisis? I feel lost. I've been really struggling, not coping much. Some days I'm okay, others not. Stressed out, but keeping my head above water most days. I use spiritual tools to stay positive and to be a helper. I stay focused on positive outcomes of this crisis situation. So we're 25%, 30, 35.
Background music. Thank you, DJ Boyd. Hit it.
And this is an anonymous poll, folks, so feel free to be honest.
Just helps us to get to know you better.
Okay, we only got 87 so far, 88. Come on. All right, 71%. $94. Come on, 6 more to get 100. We can do it. People are raising their hands. I don't know if some people are not seeing the poll. You might try minimizing your Zoom screen or tapping on it if you're on a phone. See it? Okay.
Where are we at?
All right, let's end polling now. We're at 98. Come on, 1 more, 2 more.
Come on, everybody.
2 more. All right, I'm going to end polling. So the results are here. Let's see, not bad. 33% say they use spiritual tools to stay positive. 32% stay focused on positive outcomes. But 21% are stressed out. And 11%, some days they're okay, some days not. And 3% really feel lost. And we really, our hearts are there with you. We know how hard it is, especially people who are working in certain fields right now are not having a job because they can't work. So, okay. That's
well,
that.
I think it is gratifying to know that at least 60% of the people are using some spiritual tools and are focused on positive outcomes. How can we, Chitra, how do you think we can focus, how can we use spiritual tools and focus on positive outcomes of all this while not negating how difficult it is, challenging, and how difficult a test this is for hundreds and hundreds of millions of people?
Mm-hmm. I think that whenever I'm going through a hard time, I don't know, I like to think of the analogy of a wave, and that, sometimes you can think of a wave coming and crushing you, or you can recognize that that's the nature of the wave to come down, just as life is going to have so many challenges for our own spiritual development. Unless we're faced with tests and challenges, we can't really grow spiritually. And so once we see that huge wave, we can then imagine being on top and riding it, surfing on it, or riding it through, and I think when we see the beginning and the end, and the end and the beginning, it really helps us. It helps us to see that this too shall pass. And I think one thing that helps me, for example, during fasting time, when I'm really starving and I want to eat or something, is that the hunger pangs actually make me feel united with humanity in a very deep way. It's actually indescribable. Like, I can't put it into words, but my empathy is increased and my love for all living beings is increased. And so I think that's the nature of suffering, is that like the quote, I'll end with this, from the hidden words of Baha'u'llah, is that with the fire we test the gold, and with gold we test our servants. So when gold goes through fire, it becomes purified. And so the essence of detachment is to be detached from the gold itself and just go through the process with acquiescence.
Yeah, I like that sense that tests are always going to come. Baha'u'llah says, I have made tests a healing medicine. So we get tested individually, and we also get tested
Collectively.
And globally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, great. Do we have some more questions coming our way?
Okay, let's look over here.
There are lots of questions in the Q&A box.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Q&A box. There we go. Yeah.
I'm just looking in the chat. Should I be looking somewhere else?
The
Q&A box. We told people to put their questions in the Q&A box.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry, I haven't been looking here.
Can I read one from Saba? Says, you say
Please.
being more spiritual to be a better Baha'i, which means you become a better person. As a Baha'i, I'm nevertheless curious. Can a person not be fully committed to society and fellow humans and filled with love, but not be a Baha'i or of any other belief?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And of course, the answer is of course. When I look at some of the most spiritually minded, service-oriented people I've ever met in my life, they're not Baha'is. I know some Baha'is that are, but you don't need to be a Baha'i to be committed to society and filled with love of God and love of service of humanity. So I do think the spiritual journey can help us, all of us, whether you're agnostic or Buddhist or Christian or Baha'i. Thinking of your life as an ongoing spiritual path can help us increase those qualities of service. And a lot of the answers are to be found in in spiritual teachings and spiritual truths.
Mm-hmm. Actually, when we think about it, many of the most powerful social movements that have had enormous impact on the history of humanity, modern history, have been rooted in spiritual guidance. So if we think of Gandhi and we think of, his reliance on spirituality for nonviolent social change peacefully, without a single gun, taking on the greatest colonizer of the time, and seeing what this man achieved, it's rooted in that. When we see the civil rights movement, in the United States, King visited Gandhi, and the civil rights movement was, rooted in Christianity as well. And so individually and collectively, I think your insight applies.
There's a nice question here for me from Ralph. Have you ever felt conflicted due to a character that you play that may behave in a non-Baha'i way?
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's been an interesting journey for me. I remember one time I had an audition to play Jesus, and I had to turn down the audition because Baha'is don't believe in portraying the holy manifestations of God. And there's been many characters that have been either offered to me or they've wanted to have me audition for that I just And here's how I've kind of played that, and I've always done it imperfectly. It's not been perfect at all. But if ultimately the value of the storytelling is uplifting and makes the world a better place, even if the character is deeply flawed, then it's worth it. Because it's what the purpose of the story is and the role that you play in that. If the purpose of the story is just to celebrate the worst of humanity and just, debauchery and materialism and meaningless sex and accruing things, then that hasn't, then I have turned some of those things down. I remember I did a role on the show Entourage, which when I look back on it now, I really kind of wish I hadn't, because it's pretty base, it's crude, it's just a celebration of, materialism and status and celebrity and meaningless sex, and that's one of the ones that I wish that I hadn't done. And then there's other characters that I've played that have been pretty debauched in their own way, and but ultimately the project had a good message to it, and so I'm happy to be a part of the storytelling process toward that end.
Wonderful, thanks. Other questions, Nikki, that you're seeing? I'm seeing a few, but I think a lot of them cover.
To start with, in the Baha'i Faith by Taylor Freund. What is a good book to start with? Chitra, you were talking about the Kitab-i Khan, the Book of Certitude. Well, that a little bit tricky.
I think if people want to get right into Baha'u'llah's work, Kitab-i Khan is great. I have this one, Gleanings of the Writings of Baha'u'llah. This is a compilation of Baha'u'llah's seminal work, I would say. That's really great. And then we have The Hidden Words, which Rainn referred to in the last couple ones. They're kind of like these little spiritual gems. Sometimes he's referring to the context of like the clergy that was oppressing, the Baha'is and so forth. So some of them are contextual, but a lot of them are universal, amazing truths. Then I had referred to this, The 7 Valleys and 4 Valleys. This is one of Baha'u'llah's mystical work. It's the spiritual journey one takes towards, if you were to make the analogy, our ultimate beloved. And some say, of course, God is within us, but God is also an unknowable essence that we strive to go towards. And then last but not least, Baha'u'llah's Prayers and Meditations. That's another good one. If you want to just read online, I would say to go to Baha'i.org, B-A-H. Oh, what are you showing, Rainn? Oh, The Hidden Words. Okay. That's the newer copy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a great one too. We mentioned this before, but it's very brief, little spiritual writings, koans, sayings. It's God talking to humanity. It has a lot of mystical power and beauty in very short, succinct writings.
And so that's kind of like personal study. And if you want to kind of get in just online, I would go to Baha'i.org, BAHAI.org, or Baha'i US if you want the, the American Baha'i official Baha'i website, because you can learn so much on those websites. There's quotes on all the different, principles of the faith and spiritual writings. I personally like to study in a group. So I would also highly recommend the Ruhi Institute process, where you basically get together with a group of people and you go through these booklets, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. But when you go to the Baha'i.us website, on the bottom it says contact us or something, and you can contact your local Baha'i community and get into one of those Ruhi study circles. The first one is called Reflections on the Life of the Spirit. And so, it gets into a lot of beautiful and deep themes.
There's a question from Chris Zemke. Can you talk about Walter, my son's junior youth group, and some of their service opportunities? And the answer to that is no, I can't, because we're going to be talking about just that next time we meet.
Yes.
On May the 6th.
Yes.
We're going to get to this now. May the 6th, that's 1, 2, 3 Wednesdays from now. Tell your friends. And it's going to be a focus on youth and youth and young people, about what Baha'is are doing to spiritually empower young people to be change agents in their communities. And we're going to hear from some youth guest speakers. And it's one of the most exciting things that Baha'is are involved with, activating youth to in service and seeing themselves as a vital part of humanity. So we're going to get to that one, and all of you who are watching, and we should wrap this up here a little bit. Just know on May the 6th, on Wednesday, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, we'll be having another one of these sessions.
Yes.
You wanted to talk about Baha'is at US, Nikki and Chitra?
Yes, someone had asked how can they find Baha'is near them. If you go to the Baha'i US website, which is
Baha'i.us?
Baha'i.us, and you can put in /contact. It is not hard to find where you can find this page /contact on Baha'i.us. You can click there to meet Baha'is near you or schedule a time to speak with a Baha'i by phone or video chat. You put in your name and your contact information. There's also a chat on the site itself. Or if you want to just get some free literature, you can have it mailed to you, and you can sign up for the newsletter. So,
Nikki, can if you want to stop sharing, I could share, or you can just go to the website. I would love it if you'd please just show the website and how to get there. It would be really great. Or do you want me to share?
You can share.
Okay, let me do that. So, when you first go on, you'll see you would log in if you want to get into the administrative Baha'i site, and then there's a menu here. Then you go down, there's, origins of the Baha'i Faith, building community. We talk a lot about building community, so that talks very much about exactly how we do it. And then Baha'i Faith at a glance. But when you go all the way down, that's what Nikki's talking about, where you can connect with the Baha'is, and you click here and you could talk to someone, request literature, or have the newsletter sign up. And that's how it goes. Let me stop sharing real quick.
Share your family vacation photos from that from the trip to Kauai.
Yeah, right. I wish it'll be my dream pictures.
Well, let's wrap it up, guys. This has been great. Thank you all for joining. And Chitra, it's so much fun to share this with you. Nikki, it's so much fun to do this with you. Thank you for all your help. Nikki puts together all the slideshows and the polls and the social media and publicizing, and she's not just doing it for our session, she's doing it for so many sessions that Wilmette Institute is putting on. Can you tell the people a little bit about Wilmette Institute?
Sure. Well, you can find all of this programming at our website, and I'll put it in the chat as well, but it's wilmetteinstitute.org and then /WI-live-free. So it's WI Live Free, or Live Free if you want. So let me put it here.
Yeah, and if you just go to wilmettinstitute.org, you'll see that it's all the way on the right side for the free webinars. And there's, amazing webinars if you want to peruse the old ones, from, creating a world governance to what was the recent one? Like marriage. There's just a wide array of topics that are covered.
So basically Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, and also we're going to start a series on Saturday afternoons. That's going to be excellent.
What's it on, Mickey?
In collaboration with EBBF, which stands for, something a better future.
Yes. It's an organization dedicated to, I think it started with like a Baha'i perspective of economic justice or something. And now we're collaborating to have a series of amazing presenters who will talk about many of the issues and questions that were brought up here. Yeah. So please check it out. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you so much, Rainn. Can I just say one last thing? We're so excited that Rainn is going to join us once a month. So we thought this gift would be 3 weeks, but we kind of
I'm the gift that keeps on giving.
Cajoled him into giving us time once a month, and so we're so appreciative of that. Thank you so much,
Rainn. My pleasure. Come on. So May 6th, we'll see you right back here on this same Zoom chat.
All right. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.